It seems to me that if that for some people, not being able to understand the levels of the layers of quantum that you talked about and being present to all of it all at once um, could have us start to go into a dystopian, I don't know, I better give it to AI. There's something else for us to start to look at, because I do feel like people really do want to learn how to care for each other in new ways. I feel like they really do want to see how to alter a mindset and how to be able to navigate change in this new time. And it seems to me we need to have a sense of then the organic world we live in and the kind of perception of technology and the engineered world that we have built so far, and how do we create some understanding to navigate through that as we're looking at everything's accelerating and there's multiple levels for us to be present to all at once. Is there anything in that territory that would help us move better? Because we live in this organic world of nature, yet we have harnessed an engineered world, and it seems like those two worlds don't work well together.
Well, we might be present for starters to that dystopian view that you mentioned.
Mhm.
Might have us in a mood of we're in a world of chaos, and I don't know how to handle the accelerated rate of chaotic
Yeah.
transformation, so to speak. And then it would be helpful to remember that order and chaos are not opposites. Order and chaos are complements on a continuum, and that there's always order and chaos, and there's always order, chaos in the order that we want to hold on to.
Mm.
So then, if we're present to this complementary nature of chaos and order, we have a different way of looking at unprecedented change. We have a different way of viewing order and chaos and the engineered versus the organic world. So that then when we're present to, in fact, we live in an organic world, in spite of the perception that we live in an engineered world, then how we're placed in evolution is we've had millennia of adaptation
Yeah.
from an organic presence, if
Mhm.
you will. So then as we find ourselves in a world where chips are embedded in almost everything, embedded in anything and everything being connected to everything, there's a tendency then to want to, as you mentioned earlier, turn everything over, our autonomy, if you will, our authority, to artificial intelligence. The problem, though, is that artificial intelligence is not actually able to autopoetically self up level to the next order. So then, because we're organic systems, we have that ability, and that has always fallen to us in spite of our perception that AI is the cause of evolution. It's
Mhm.
always bringing our organic, higher mindset to our creative abilities from an organic system
Yeah.
to auto poetically up level our place in the world.
Yeah. So a truly integrated, complex system like nature or like the organic world that we live in has emergent properties. But I don't know that we know what that means. And as we look at this phenomenon that I think business and tech and engineering have been in, that I've heard called deferred complexity and tech debt, it seems to me we need to have an understanding, because we're living in a complex living system and it's moving very rapidly, but we really don't know how to navigate it. We don't know how to even think about it. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about deferred complexity and what that means to us navigating this new world.
Well, deferred complexity and tech debt are sort of tech and coding
Mm.
conversations, if you will, in which, in the manner of coding this thing or in the manner of putting this system together, we might fully acknowledge to each other that this isn't integrated with the world it's embedded in. And it's a
Mhm.
kind of compromise to, this is what we need, this is what we'll do now, and we'll deal with a downline effect of that later.
Yes.
I'm coding for this situation now, as tech is. I'm I'm integrating this system, or I'm coding for this now, realizing that we'll have to change it later as it meets the world. So then deferred complexity means that we're integrating this thing in a closed system. And in thermodynamics in the world, what we know in a closed system is always headed towards what's called heat death.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a knowledge that if I'm integrating, then complication is a lot of difference that's not integrated, and complexity is a lot of difference that's integrated. They're saying we will integrate the difference within this closed world, and then we'll deal later with how that closed world meets the open world.
Yeah.
And we're acknowledging that a closed world is leading to metaphorically heat death, or it's not going to work in the organic world, but we're going to let that, if it works for now, we're deferring that conversation, and the price we'll pay for that for down the road then.
Yeah. It seems like business then has organized itself from deferred complexity often, not all the time, but sometimes it has organized itself in that way. When I have to pay the shareholders, or when I go after short-term profit and I pull in more natural resources, it seems to me that's how we've done it to ourselves in business. And so there might be a way where we have a different understanding about what complexity is, and how the organic world and the engineered world operate in terms of how do we go to work on that then? Because it's definitely what we've done in business and in other places, is just defer this to the next generation and defer this to the next generation. Seems like we have multiple systems that aren't integrated to each other and not really to the world at large, so that our organic world finds itself at odds with the engineered system.
Well, I think an example of that is I recently was taking a flight to England from Colorado in the state. So we have this huge mega plane, jumbo plane, I think they would call it. And I might imagine there might be, and I think I've heard that there are literally more than 1 million parts in a plane like that. So you can imagine that that's a lot of difference, a lot of different parts that are now integrated so that that plane could fly. So it's vastly complex within the shell of that plane.
Mm-hmm.
So it's isolated to the world, such that as we were sitting waiting to take off, it was discovered that there was a part that wasn't talking to another part. It was a software part in this case. So we were grounded on the runway for hours because one part didn't talk to another part in a plane that had millions of parts, that had a high degree of complexity within its system, and yet because its engineered complexity was unable to fix itself.
Yeah.
So this high degree of complexity engineered required an organic someone, and in this case it required a crew of human beings to enter the plane and go to work on that software. And you might have imagined, well, couldn't that software have been engineered remotely?
Yeah.
Apparently not. So that was one example of a closed system that
Wow.
software could not have been engineered from a terminal or somewhere else. It required human beings to come in and uplift that. That's just the first leg of closed system deferred complexity tech debt.
Yeah.
There's also the idea of, we have this huge plane and it does what it does, and it hasn't been engineered in a way that it takes into that calculation its effect on the environment it's embodied in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then what's the ecological consequence of the tons of fuel it's burning?
Yeah.
Could we have engineered that plane differently so it was in harmony with the ecosystem? And on and on and on. And so that ripple effect then is saying this closed system, a way of approaching how we engineered the world, what would it mean to be present to that? We could live in a world that we could recognize our engineered system, that we truly live in an organic world. And what if we engineered as an organic world first?
Yeah. We are the HuPerson Project. This is the WYRK work to be done. Come join us. Let's have a conversation.